Quran said, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. You'll have success if you purify your soul. Tazkiyah, how do I purify my soul? Prayer, and zakat. Then he gives examples of illa being used as a wow in the Arabic language. Or, I'll give you another example. وَلَا تَقُولُوا لِشَيْءٍ إِنِّي فَاعِلٌ ذَلِكَ غَدًا إِلَّا أَنْ يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ. In the Rasm al-Uthmani, it doesn't say shay, it says shay. So it literally would mean, don't say to any willer, I'm going to do that tomorrow. Shay. It has an alif there from the Rasm al-Uthmani. Many examples like that in the Quran. The fa in Arabic, there's fa sababiyya. Like for instance, kun fayakun. The fa there is not, normally the sababiyya would come after an amr. But that fa is not a sababiyya, it's a fa ta'qib. So it says kun fayakunu. And there's a whole metaphysical understanding of why that fa is not a sababiyya. I'm just giving you really simple examples of, the religion takes a long time to learn. I'm definitely still a student of Arabic, like طالب علم في العربية. Balagha is very complicated. Kinaya, just isti'ara. Majaz is very sophisticated. There's all these different types of majaz, figurative language. Majaz al-mursal, which is a big problem with certain people in Aqidah, not understanding majaz al-mursal. Right? So that's one major reason. But the other reason is the Prophet clearly said that the Qurun al-Mufaddala were the first 3 centuries, and that these were the Salaf. And the best madhab is the madhab of the Salaf. And they were using usul al-fiqh. We know that. And so if Malik was using usul al-fiqh, if Imam Shafi'i was, who are we in our arrogance to think we can bypass their methodology and go directly to the book and the sunnah when they didn't go directly to the book and the sunnah without the filter of usul al-fiqh. So, but this is what they call jahl murakkab. The Catholics call it innocent and arrogant ignorance. Muslims called it simple and compounded ignorance. But the result's the same, whether you call it innocent or arrogant or simple or compound. Simple ignorance, all of you, and inshallah myself, all of us, we're simply ignorant because we'll admit our ignorance, like I want to know. And so I'm amenable to learning because I'll say I don't know. If I don't know something, hopefully I'll be able to say it. The first thing Murabbit al-Hajj taught me, literally, one of the very first things that he taught me was, La adri is half of knowledge. And he said, Man qala la adri faqad afta. Whoever says I don't know, he's given fatwa. Imam Malik was asked 40 questions by an Iraqi, and in 38 of them he said, I don't know. The Iraqi, when he finished, he said, what do I tell the people of Iraq? They asked me to go to you to figure out these things. I'm going to go back and what do I tell them? He said, tell them you went to Malik and he said he doesn't know. Right? Man yakrahu la adri usibat maqatilu. They say whoever doesn't like to say la adri, he's going to be afflicted with mortal wounds. So just simple ignorance is a blessing. It's not a good state to stay in, but it's a blessing to be in. It's called the beginner's mind in Zen. They say the greatest learners are people that maintain a beginner's mind because beginners are always cautious. Once you get good at something, you tend to become second nature, whereas the beginner, he's always cautious, alert, awake. And so that's very important, but jahl murakkab is a real problem in our community. Compounded ignorance, not knowing that we don't know. Or we think we know. Our tradition adhered to what they call the correspondence theory of knowledge, which is al-ilmu ma yutabiq al-waqi'. That's the definition of knowledge, right? Wal-jahl ma yukhalif al-waqi', right? So knowledge is what corresponds with reality. If it doesn't correspond with reality, then you're either in waham, there's different things that you can be in. But jahl murakkab is one of those, where you think you know something and you don't know it. And our knowledge is, there are certain knowledges that are just, you either know them or you don't. Grammar, you either know it or you don't. There's 7 marfu'at. You either know them or you don't. There's 14 mansubat. It actually goes up to over 20. But the basic ones, there's 3 majrurat generally. You either know them or you don't know them. You either know sarf or you don't know sarf. You either know that it's it's either hasiba yahsibu, right? You either know that or you don't know it. Or it's hasiba yahsabu. Both are correct, right? I used to, when I first started translating for Sheikh Abdullah, because I love sarf, when I first started translating for him, I would hear him say a word, like a verb or something, and I knew it differently, and I thought it was a lahan, because most ulama make lahan, right? The Mauritanians say al-hanu min qari. He makes more grammatical mistakes than someone reading a book, because Arabic's so hard. It's really hard. I'm not gonna. It's sahl mumtana. It's easy and possible, right? But grammar is sarf is harder than grammar. Grammar is actually not that bad, but sarf is really hard in Arabic because it just takes a long time to learn all these different forms. But I used to think, why did he say that? And then I'd go back to the dictionary and look at it and find that it was another way, that it was correct. And in all the years I've translated, I never heard him say a lahan. It's amazing. I stopped looking. Now I consider him better than the dictionary. Because the dictionaries make mistakes. I haven't found him make mistakes. I told him once that my father and I got into a debate about a word. So I went and got the dictionary. I showed him the dictionary. And he said, "Do you think I'll concede to that?" He says, "That's just Webster." So I told Sheikh Abdullah that, and he said, "Lillahi darru abik." Congratulations to your father. Because not all the meanings are in dictionaries, right? Anyway. And then all the different meanings of the words. There's just so many meanings, like dhahar. Dhahar means back, right? I mean, that's generally the connotation, denotation. But also means road. Tariq fil bar. Bayna dhahranayk. Or bayna dhahranayhim, or bayna adhurihim, or bayna dhahrayhim. All those are the same ways of saying that in their midst. I'm in their midst. But bayna dhahranayhim, it's dhahran is a place of 2 roads, right? So it means there's tariq al-bar, right? So you're there in the middle of it all. Anyway, so let me. So any other questions? Mm-hmm. You can have comments too if you feel compelled, but just make it very short.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
So I'm understanding that from the last few classes we've attended, and this one too, I think is solidifying that the healthy way of understanding revelation or the moral code that is revealed to us in the Quran is to go through a madhab. However, I wanted to ask, for someone who, obviously for myself, I should speak. I go to the Quran and I try to read, a verse or 2 a day, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I go to it for understanding and a coolness for my heart. However, I don't have access to a teacher per se.
Sure.
To be quite honest, most people didn't even know about the 4 madhabs until they got to register for the Rihla.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, the access of teaching would be online or, the local masjid. Mm-hmm. You don't even know who the teachers of the masjid, what madhab they fall into, that sort of thing. So what I'm trying to ask is, what is your advice on how one who would want to, what kind of approach one should have? To the Quran for understanding.
Yeah, no,
without taking it out.
Yeah, it's a very valid point you're making. Quran, there's two ways of reading the Quran. One of them is devotional, simply to read it as an act of ibadah. And the Ajam all over the world have been doing this for centuries. Like, if you want to see, if you go to a lot of mosques where people understand the language generally of the Quran, they do 8 rakats, and very often very short, and then they leave in Ramadan. If you go to a lot of the Ajam countries, they do the 20 rakats and do the juz every night, right? They're Ajam. Sometimes you see people crying. It's amazing. That's one way of reading the Quran, just what's called ta'abbudi, just devotional. يتعبد بالقرآن. The Quran, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمْ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا. Don't they think deeply about this Quran? Don't they ponder the Quran? So the Quran was revealed to be pondered, clearly. Then we get to the tools of understanding the Quran. And traditionally, and I'm just speaking traditionally, what many people did was they learned basic Islam and they practiced it, and then they read devotional books and seerah. Seerah was very popular in the Muslim Ummah. In Mauritania, the women are famous for memorizing long poems of the Prophet's life. They're not scholars. They're just people that love the Prophet, and they teach their children these poems. And so there's a devotional component that's very powerful. Now, for somebody who's educated like yourself, who has an intellect, you want more, because that's not satisfying for everybody, right? Some people, they're very content with that level. Not everybody's intellectual, and not everybody was meant to be intellectual. Some of the best people I've ever met are very simple people. I've met illiterate people that I would take over some of the most educated people I've met any day of the week, right? And I have no contempt for people that are uneducated at all. I really try not to, I've been fortunate, I've been privileged to have a relatively good education. I had a good education before I became Muslim. I went to some really good schools, private schools. I was fortunate because there was a trust fund to do that from my grandfather. And then I studied with incredible scholars in the Emirates. I was really fortunate at a young age to be able to go with a full scholarship to the United Arab Emirates and study with some of the best scholars in the Ummah at that time. It's very fortunate. That's pure privilege. Like, what did I do to deserve that? I wasn't born in Sri Lanka in an impoverished family where I had to, at the age of 8, start working with my father to help support the family, and then I never learned to read or write, right? That's a whole other world, right? And that's another human being. So that's the nature of dunya. فَضَّلْنَا بَعْضُكُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. We have privileged some of you over others as a test, right? لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ. I mean, Allah is testing you with your privilege. Are you going to look on contempt and think you're superior? When in fact, if you look at it, they say if you find a turtle on a fence, the one thing you know, he didn't get there by himself, right? And that's the truth for all of us. Wherever we are, we did not get here on our own. And so you have to be grateful. You have to see it as a tribulation from Allah. How are you going to use your privilege? How are you going to use it? It's a privilege to have wealth. It's a privilege. Why does Allah always ask us to give our wealth? Because wealth is a test, and Allah's seeing, are you passing the test or not? He only asks 2.5. Anything you give above that, gravy. Just getting closer to Allah, but He wants at least 2.5. Don't stint Him on that. Right? So that's it's very important that you nurture your intellect and help it to grow. And the best way to do that, look, we have a lot of tools that we did not have in the past. I'm not a big proponent of online learning, but for motivated people, it's an option. People have learned tajweed online. It's pretty amazing, right? You can learn Arabic. I mean, there's incredible resources to do that. In terms of reading the Quran, I would argue as long as you go to it very humbly and recognize that you cannot legislate from the Quran other than morally. I mean, there's things in the Quran. وَقُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا. Speak beautifully to people. I mean, we can all read that and benefit from that, right? The Quran says, "Idfa' billati hiya ahsan." Return a wrong with a right. We can all benefit from that. The Quran said, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. You'll have success if you purify your soul. Tazkiyah, how do I purify my soul? Prayer, zakat, tilawat al-Quran, tahajjud, fasting, the company of righteous people that remind me, show me my faults. So all those things are beneficial. So I think it's a good thing to read the Quran, even in translation. I think it's a beneficial thing. It's dangerous in that, there are many times, even to this day still, where I've read the Quran and I thought I understood something, and then I go to the tafsir and realize I didn't get it right. And I have a reasonably good level of Arabic. And I've spent a lot of time in Arabic, a lot of time in dictionaries. I'm in a dictionary every single day. I think my wife's here and will testify to that. And I look up words all the time in Arabic. So, but I still, there's things in the Quran I'm always finding that just, subhanAllah. Even Surah Al-Waqi'ah, certain surahs that I read every day, there's things it's amazing. I'll just see something I never saw before and then go to tafsir. And there's not very many really good tafsirs, to be honest with you. Most of them just repeat what previous mufassirun said because they're scared. I'm telling you the truth. The ulama were really afraid of the Quran. It's like, who am I to say what God means? So they'll just say, قال الطبري, قال القرطبي. I mean, that's literally what they do. So if you have Tabari and Qurtubi, you pretty much have all the tafsirs because it's like the commentaries of a hadith. They all go back to the same commentaries. قال قاضي عياض, قال ابن بطال. They all quote the same sources because very few people wanted that. They were just very careful about saying, because you're saying this is what God means. That's a big claim. And that's why very few people wrote tafsir. There's 1 million books on tajweed. Everybody wrote a book on tajweed. There's so many books on tajweed. I can't believe you go to the souk and there's a new book on tajweed. I'm like amazed. And I'm always hoping maybe they found some amazing way to teach it. You open up, it's all the same stuff. There's 17 points of articulation. There's here's all the mudud. It's all the same. Never anything new. So if you have a new way of teaching tajweed, by all means, write a book on tajweed. But if it's going to be the same thing, don't. Save yourself. But there are exceptions. Fakhruddin al-Razi is an exception. He definitely had some new things that nobody said before about the Quran. Also, some of the al-Bursawi, some of the great Sufi commentators had some really interesting insights. Ibn Juzay al-Kalbi talked about as-Sulami's book that he called al-Haqa'iq, the realities. He did a short tafsir of the Quran, and Ibn Juzay said some people called it al-Bawatil, the vanities, instead of the realities. And he said, but if we're fair, we'll say fihi haqa'iq wa fihi bawatil. It has some realities and it has some vanities in it. So, but tafsir is very rich study. Alhamdulillah. So, subhanakallah wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta. Did that help a little bit? Yeah, más o menos. Yeah. My apologies. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق تواصوا بالصبر. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. بارك الله فيكم.